So with that, I'll go ahead and ask for the first slide to be brought up, which will get us going. And in the meantime, take a minute to introduce the participants today. I'll start. My name is Mike Zenick. I'm the president and CEO of InvestAmerica. InvestAmerica is a immigration consulting firm and investment banking firm. We represent regional centers and other EB-5 sponsors to promote their projects and reach out to individual EB-5 investors to help them make their selections. We've been in the business since 2010, so I've been doing this quite a while. We represent both regional center projects as well as direct pooled projects, which you'll hear about a little bit later in the webinar. And our focus is really on due diligence. We are affiliated with a securities firm called Sequence Financial Specialists that we're specially licensed in the securities industry here in the United States. That basically requires that we do things that and conduct our business in a way that most other firms are not required to do. Because what we're selling and what you're investing into is a U.S. security, it's important that you deal with people that understand those industries and understand the offerings that are being provided or presented. We do extensive due diligence, financial analysis, and other analysis and examination to make sure that whatever projects are being put out there are being done are projects that have been well vetted, that have been properly analyzed and done so to make sure that projects are structurally beneficial to investors and are meant to protect investors. So that's our main goal is putting out high quality investments that are going to, number one, have the best chance of achieving your two main goals: achieving your green card and achieving return of your capital when it's available to be returned several years later. So that's InvestAmerica, and for now I'm going to introduce Ed Bashara and have him introduce himself, give his own bio and the capabilities and functions of his firm. Ed?
Good. Thank you, Mike, for the invitation. Greatly appreciated, and I'm looking forward to our discussion today. But just very briefly, I've been an attorney now for 38 years, specializing and only handling business and family immigration. I've been handling EB-5 cases since the inception of the program for 30 years. And we've represented, literally thousands of EB-5 investors investing in EB-5 regional center projects as well as EB-5 direct projects. We have also created EB-5 regional center projects with our team of professionals, as well as direct. So we've worked for the investors and we've worked for the developers and operators as well. Active member of Invest in USA. It's an organization that represents the EB-5 industry. I'm on the advisory committee of the Investment Migration Council, which is based in Geneva, Switzerland, which looks at the movement of high net worth investors from country to country to get residency or citizenship by investment. And we are an organization that makes sure, as Mike does, that there's due diligence and credibility of the service providers and the projects, right, which becomes very important. I'm a professor, adjunct professor of business immigration law at the University of Florida Law School. I have law degrees from Australia as well as the US. And Invest in USA won Innovator of the Year award a couple of years ago. So we've been very active in EB-5 and business immigration. And we are insistent that no matter who the investor is, that they do seek the advice of professionals and advisors who are experienced and have the expertise. We expect that, and we have a holistic approach to helping all the investors enter the United States, which means that they need services in certain disciplines because every decision they make will have an immigration consequence, tax consequence, etc. So hopefully Michael and I will be able to advise the listeners and put them on the right track to make a informed and good decision regarding EB-5.
Great, thank you, Ed. I think you mentioned IUSA, and I think it's important and the reason why we're doing this is because Ed and we do serve on a variety of industry-related associations, and we are on various committees and leadership councils of all of those. So we've been privy to a lot of the information that has been circulated within the industry that's also been presented to Congress for consideration when it comes to renewing the regional center program, which we're going to talk about right now. So yes. This is a quick overview you see on your screen, slide of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk a little bit about what happened on December 3rd, 2021. We're going to talk about a little bit of the timeline there since June 30th, and kind of looking at what the timeline looks like going forward. We're going to talk about what that means, for existing investors. If you're looking at, making a current investment into an EB-5 project, and also what it means for regional centers. We're going to talk about, with the regional center down right now, what is available and how long will it be available, and at the terms that it is currently available. And then we'll talk about a couple of specific direct pooled EB-5 offerings that we are sponsoring at InvestAmerica right now. And then lastly, we're going to talk about some other considerations, outside of the investment that we, as both as professionals, Ed as an attorney and us as investment bankers, suggest that everybody look into when it comes to evaluating your investment, as well as what you're going to do once you get here to the United States. So with that, let's talk about what happened on December 3rd, 2021. I'll start it off, and Ed will go back and forth. But essentially, the Regional Center Program, a couple of things happened actually in June. I'll talk about the first item, which is the Regional Center Program expiring, and it basically was scheduled to sunset on June 30th of this year. And despite an effort by IUSA in particular, and Senators Grassley and Leahy to propose a bill that would have reauthorized the program for several years and implemented a lot of necessary integrity measures to clean the program up a little bit and make it a little more compliant with securities laws and other and immigration laws. That effort failed. So it expired on June 30th. Since that time, there's been no legislation that has allowed the program to be reauthorized, and right now we're sort of sitting in limbo. So Ed, you give us a little flavor for what happened on December 3rd with the latest effort to renew the program, and where are we looking as far as time frame to get the regional center program back up and running?
Well, as you said, Mike, there are a number of organizations that we're involved in that are trying to make things happen for the benefit of all investors, whether under the regional center program or direct. But I failed to mention that the American Immigration Lawyers Association, the national organization, has a national EB-5 committee, which I'm a member of. And so we're all trying to make things happen for the benefit of our investors and everyone else in the industry. But also what happened on June the 3rd, as Mike said, that the EB-5 Regional Center Program lapsed, right? It was not reauthorized. There was an anticipated reauthorization that could have occurred on December the 3rd. However, it was not approved, and there's a continuous resolution that is moving the proposed reauthorization further down the road until February of 2022. But also what happened back in June was that, and we're going back a little bit further to 2019. In 2019, the minimum investment amount, whether it was for a direct or EB-5 regional center program, increased from 500,000 to 900,000 as a minimum. And then it went up to 1.8 million if the investment was not in a target employment area. Well, back in 2021, before June, a federal court case in which the new regulations that were implemented in November of 2019 were challenged. And in fact, the federal judge made the decision to vacate, which dismiss these new regulations. And so the minimum amount went back to $500,000 as a minimum. So right now there's an opportunity for all investors, and only under the direct program, to invest $500,000. If there is a reauthorization, Mike, there's a bill for the reauthorization which incorporates an investment amount, a minimum investment amount of $750,000. So that means that if the regional center program is reauthorized, the minimum investment will increase, not just for the regional center program, but for direct program as well. So I think that there's an opportunity that until there's reauthorization, that the minimum investment is going to probably still be at $500,000.
Okay, and I agree. It's definitely been a bit of a question from people that we've heard, on different immigration attorneys have different perspectives on the risk that investors have investing right now at $500,000. USCIS has actually put that on their website that it's now at $500,000. So I think it'd be very hard for the service or Congress to say, hey, anybody that's invested since the ruling of the judge at $500,000, you're going to have to pony up more money, or your filing's not going to be considered valid or whatever. So I think there's some concern there. We certainly disclose those risks to investors and let them know that there's always that possibility, although unlikely. So I think that, as Ed said, there is a real opportunity right now. And Ed mentioned the February 2022 date for the next opportunity for the regional center to be reauthorized. And what we've come to understand and figure out is, when being right now trying to be tied to the government spending bill, which expired September 30th of this year, got extended to December 3rd. And then at that point, it didn't happen December 3rd, so another clean resolution until February 18th of 2022. So we're talking about February 18th, 2022. While that's the next date, it's not necessarily a final date. They could extend it again. Again, it could be another clean continuing resolution for who knows how long. And meaning that, again, the regional center program will continue to not be available. And there's some concern that I've heard that if they don't, and that's just for the continuing resolution, right? So there's proposed legislation that's on EB-5 that has been put to Congress, but they've got no obligation or responsibility. Well, they got responsibility, but they don't have any obligation to include that legislation in whatever bill is passed, whether it's February 18th or later. So it's important that the industry and all of its components continue to push that and make sure that that's going to be a priority for Congress, at least one of the things that they want to include on the bill. So I think my point is, the regional center program always has this level of uncertainty of whether it's going to be extended, whether it's going to be reauthorized. And we'll talk a minute about the direct program, which does not have those issues.
Yeah. And I think, Mike, one of the points that you mentioned before is that equally as important as extending the regional center program is a legal term that we use, is the grandfathering in of the existing EB-5 investors and applicants who are in the process of getting their 526 petitions approved and then moving on to get their conditional residency. Right now, there could be over 90,000 pending petitions and applicants that have really been put in a very difficult situation, because without the knowledge and anticipation, most people in the EB-5 industry, lawyers, organizations, everyone, was under the impression that if US Congress said, look, here's an EB-5 regional center program, make an investment, and then you're okay. Right. And that's what the whole industry did. That's what all the investors did, because the feedback we were getting was, well, right now it's authorized, and in a couple of days it may not be reauthorized. So everyone made the investment in good faith, relying on that representation from Congress and USCIS.
Right.
So now, since, of course, as we know, since June the 30th, there's no movement of these existing EB-5 investors or applicants. They're at a standstill. So they're not grandfathered in. So if we are looking at reauthorization, part of that reauthorization bill is grandfathering all those existing petitions and applicants to make them move forward, make USCIS to implement a process to make them move forward, and the new investors. So if the new regional center program is reauthorized for 1 year, let's say, and hopefully longer, then if you invested in a new program extension, you're grandfathered in. That means that they will have to process your petition even if the program lapses again. So grandfathering in is very, very essential. So you are going to see a push, hopefully by our industry, Mike, for grandfathering in, regardless of whether the EB-5 Regional Center program is approved or reauthorized. We still want to equally make sure that there's grandfathering in to protect the existing investors and the new investors.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that is a good segue into the second topic of the webinar, which is, what does it mean? You've done a good job of sort of handling the first bullet point there on the screen of, what does it mean for existing investors? As you mentioned, unfortunately, right now they are frozen. They're being held in abeyance. If you've got an outstanding I-526 petition, it has indicated it was going to be held in abeyance until the end of December of this year, with anticipating prior to that there was going to be some resolution prior, before on December 3rd and before the end of the year. What the industry is doing right now, IUSA and other organizations that are there to protect investors and the industry, they've all sent letters and are encouraging Congress, and first encouraging USCIS to continue that abeyance into 2022. There's a lot, obviously there's a lot of nervous investors that if December 31st, if it's not continued to held in abeyance, people will get notices of denial. And even if you've had your I-526 approved, but you've not gotten had your interview or received your conditional green card, you're also in limbo. So there needs to be a focus on that. I know that they're trying to even potentially have that grandfathering clause for existing investors and future investors. If they can't get the program reauthorized right now, let's at least get the grandfathering done from a legislative perspective to give those so they can continue to process them and accomplish what you mentioned before.
Yeah. And Mike, what doesn't make any sense whatsoever is that the USCIS and Congress have said, okay, or stated that if you are an investor and you have received your conditional permanent residency, you're grandfathered in. So, there seems to be a grandfathering in and a continuation of the USCIS and the State Department processing conditional permanent resident investors who are about to file their 829 petition to remove the conditions to get their full green card. So those conditional permanent residents, the EB-5 investors and their family members, have been grandfathered in under a regional center program, which is not reauthorized, but they're still being processed under the regional center program. So the fact that they're doing that doesn't make any sense why they can't do the same thing for those existing EB-5 investors.
100% agree. But I think we can also agree that a lot of times, no matter which branch of the government or which department of the government you're talking about, they don't always do things that are, that make sense or are logical. So, so I think we can agree that they need to do something for sure. And if there's anybody listening here, or that you know of anybody that's in this situation, please reach out to you can certainly ask a question here in the webinar. But if you need further guidance, please reach out to Ed in particular or me, and we can help at least give you the answers that we know right now. So the other thing, and we're not going to spend too much time on this, is what does this mean for regional centers? And basically what it means is you can't sell a regional center project right now. Before the expiration of the program in June, we had 5 regional center projects that we were offering in a variety of industries. We had one in manufacturing, we had one in infrastructure, we had one multifamily, we had a resort casino, and we had we had others that we were in consideration of. Now, obviously, they were all at 900,000. So, because we don't know what the final number is going to be, it's been proposed in the legislation to be 700,000, but we don't know if Congress is going to make it higher, make it lower. So at this point, they're sitting around just waiting. I know a lot of people. We've been talking to a lot of investors that are considering the direct EB-5, who have either committed to a regional center project already by putting a deposit down of some sort, or they feel like the regional center program is, quote unquote, safer for them, and they want to hold out until that occurs. I think everybody believes that the regional center program will be reauthorized at some point, but for now, there's no ability to invest in a regional center project. A lot of the regional centers have been, because they don't know what's going on, because they also had very light activity, relatively speaking, at the $900,000 level for the previous year and a half. Once the rules changed, I know a lot of people have been cutting their staffs down, and whether it's taking people out of country or reducing their back office staff. Most of the regional centers are very lean right now when it comes to staffing, because they can't do any promotion of their existing or their projects that we're selling at the end of June. So it's posing a big problem for them, and also the investors that committed and want a regional center project. But right now, there's nothing that can be done until the program's reauthorized.
Yeah, a bit of good news though, that if you are a existing investor that has not had your 526 approved, or you don't have your conditional residency, remember that when you file the 829 petition to remove the conditions, at that point in time, and that's usually after you file your 526, to the time you reach that point, it could be 4.5, 5 years, right? So, I know that the regional center program has lapsed for 6 months now. So if the program is reauthorized, as long as you can show at the 829 level, which is at the end of your conditional residency, that the jobs have been created, right? The investment has remained at risk, you're still going to be okay under the EB-5 regional center program, right? So we've still got that potential benefit that you don't have to show job creation now. Usually it's according to a business plan, but the ultimate time frame is at the end of the conditional residency to show the required jobs have been created and your investments at risk. Right.
So what does that mean for prospective investors? And as I'm answering that question, we can go ahead and move to the next slide. Prospective investors, it basically means that you've got you either can wait, as we talked about, for the regional center program to come back, or you can invest in an EB-5 direct program. The EB-5 direct program was the original program. It is a permanent program, meaning that it doesn't go through the same reauthorization, same issues that the regional center program goes through. And I guess maybe really quickly, Ed, can you give us a kind of an understanding of what are the key differences between regional center program and the direct program?
Right. Very quickly, the similarities is that if you make an investment and you want to make a minimum investment today of 500,000, then the location of the project, regardless whether it's in a regional center program or direct program, it has to be in a target employment area or rural area, right? So there's a similarity there. There still has to be in both regional center and direct programs the creation of 10 jobs per investor. The difference is that under the regional center program, you can show jobs are created indirectly, but for the investor in an EB-5 direct project, you have to show 10 full-time jobs created per investor, and each of those jobs has to be by a US citizen or permanent resident. Usually, there's two types of EB-5 direct, where the investor will invest in their own business and create 10 jobs, or they are amongst 3 or 4 investors and they invest in what we call a pooled project, a project operated and managed by a separate company, and then the investor comes in individually, makes the investment, usually walks away, has very little management role, but is amongst other investors, and then the business itself, and this is where Mike comes in to do the due diligence, that there may have to be a creation for 4 investors of 40 jobs plus a cushion, right? So I think those are the main differences. EB-5 Direct, EB-5 Regional Center, both require similarities in TEAs, rural area, same investment amount, and of course, there's a difference in the job creation, Mike.
Right. Thank you, Ed. Absolutely, and we've been involved with EB-5 Direct Pooled for several years. We actually had a direct pooled offering back in 2014 and 2015 in a franchise that was successfully raised. We know that it works. A lot of people, even some immigration attorneys, have never done a direct EB-5. So because they've been, all they've really had the interest from investors on is regional center. So it's important to, if you are going to be investing in a direct EB-5, it's important that you have an immigration attorney that understands the differences and make sure that they can walk you through that. Right now, as we mentioned before, the direct EB-5 investment is available at $500,000 for projects that are in a targeted employment area, or $1 million if the project is not in a targeted employment area. It's important when you're looking at a project like that. We're going to talk about the ones we have in a minute, but it's important when you look at that as Ed mentioned, that you look at the job cushion. The 10 per investor is the requirement. So if you're looking at something that's right at 10 or 11, I think you need to be, somewhat concerned that there's not going to be enough jobs, depending on how many investors are in that particular project. Just make sure that you ask the right questions relative to that. So look for a good cushion. Anywhere, I would say 13 jobs per investor or higher is something that you can feel a little more comfortable. And then also, we want to make sure, you also want to make sure that because EB-5 direct pooled offerings are typically, the EB-5 money is typically a larger percentage of the capital stack than in a typical regional center deal. Make sure that the sponsor is putting up some money of their own. They've got some risk in it. They've got some skin in the game to make sure that they're taking that risk. And then lastly, make sure that, well, not lastly, but one of the other key things is make sure that you are, as an investor, are going to be in a either senior position, some sort of preferred position, meaning that the sponsor or the developer is not taking money off the table while you're sitting there with your $500,000 at risk for several years. Make sure that they have limited ability to do that, only being able to reinvest in the company, or utilize that money, set it aside to repay your investment several years later. It should be, first money out should go to you to first get your annual return, pay your annual return, as well as repay your invested capital. Those are important things to look for. In addition to sort of the normal things, how good is this developer? How good is this restaurant franchise? How long have they been around? Have they been successful? Do they have any, do a Google search. Is there anything bad that's out there on Google about them? That's one of the key things we do. It's not a very sophisticated level of due diligence, but let me tell you, we've ruled out a lot of projects in the past by just doing a simple Google search.
Right.
I would, any other comments about what people should be aware of or look for in a direct pooled project?
Sure, Mike, because you just mentioned that if there's something in the background of, an operator or developer of a company or a business that's really separate to the pooled investors, that it has to be declared in the offering documents, right? Because, the offering documents are bound by SEC regulation. So if there's something that happened, like a judgment against one of the owners, that has to be mentioned, stated. But also, if you're looking at a EB-5 direct and it's only 4 investors, 40 jobs. The you mentioned, Mike, that the maybe the owner and the operator of this pooled EB-5 has to have skin in the game, make an investment, right? Besides the EB-5 investors. Well, now USCIS is requiring the non-EB-5 investors in the project to authenticate their source of funds, right? So they also have to show that the funds are coming in from lawful sources as the EB-5 investors. So I think that the EB-5 investors can either create their own business to bring in family members, as an example, for a pooled EB-5, or they can go to a pooled EB-5 where they come in as independent investors into a project that Mike is doing their due diligence on, and then they're investing basically in a project where they walk away, but the project principals, Mike, and you might want to address this, that have the experience and expertise, maybe EB-5 regional center experience or EB-5 experience in running this type of business and managing this type of business. It's not just a company saying, oh, by the way, we are now an EB-5 project.
Sure. Well, I think we're going to move to the next slide here, and as we're doing that, I'll make one more comment about people doing direct on their own. It's certainly an option, certainly something that many people have done previously. The only thing I would caution people in doing is that it's required to invest at this point $500,000 in a TEA or $1 million in a non-TEA. However, if it's going to be your project that you own yourself, that you're putting together yourself, outside of any capital that you can get from somewhere else, you're responsible for putting in whatever extra other money it's going to need to develop the business. And the key is the business has to be viable. It has to be there. It has to generate the employees. It's got to be it's got to generate revenue to be able to survive. So if you're the owner, you're the one setting it up, you have the risk of making sure that or the responsibility of making sure that business stays afloat and does all the things it needs to do to qualify, and that includes paying employees and things like that. So most people, what we do is we represent some projects that kind of take that worry away, take that responsibility away. And this slide highlights two of them that we have right now. I'll start with the one on the right, which is the Flying Biscuit Cafe. It is a 28-year-old restaurant franchise based in Atlanta, Georgia, and it is looking to expand. It's got it will have 30 locations here within the next couple of months, non-EB-5 related locations, and they're looking to expand into Houston. So they are going to be developing 6 new locations, all in targeted employment areas, which we have letters from the local authorities confirming that, in Houston, Texas. And the franchisor is a 30-plus experienced, 35-year experienced franchisor. He created several national brands here in the United States. Several of whom, one example is Moe's Southwest Grill. He created that from scratch and sold that off many years ago to another group. He's continued to kind of do those kinds of things, create some franchises from scratch, as well as buy some existing franchises and help grow them. And Flying Biscuit is one of those that he acquired from the original founder. And he's a very well capitalized franchisor. He is personally guaranteeing whether if people get their I-526s denied, that he will refund the money. Some other key features of this is a lot of people think, well, restaurants, COVID, and this goes for the Drunken Dragon also. When we talk about that, it has survived COVID. Flying Biscuit was able to beef up their delivery service in particular, as well as their takeout. So they were able to shift the staffing to focus more on non-touch, non-dining in restaurant dining revenue, and they survived COVID. They had a couple of locations closed right before COVID. They were getting ready as a corporate company to go back and revive those. Then COVID hit. So, but they lost no locations during COVID. In fact, they were able to maintain their revenue base and their profitability quite nicely. And now they're continuing to grow into Texas. That one right now, it's a 2.5% per year preferred return. The exit strategy is going to be accumulation of cash flow, which the financial projections were compiled by a certified public accounting firm. So we have a lot of confidence and benefit and belief that this transaction will be able to secure somebody's green card as well as have their return of capital. The way the operations of these locations will work is the company, the franchisor, is going to contracting with experienced franchisee operators who will come in as an operator, not an owner of the franchise, and they will be directed to run the franchise in accordance with the franchisor's guidelines, and they will also need to contribute $100,000 of their own money into the location. And their incentive to take ownership of that individual location is to return the capital to the EB-5 investors, 5 to 7 years later. And the last unique feature of this, there's lots of really great features of it, but the last unique feature of this project is the investors are investing into a single entity that will then individually own each of the 6 locations. So there's a diversification of job creation risk, which we're anticipating 15 jobs per location. So that will be 15 jobs per investor. But instead of the investor being assigned to an individual location, they will all be in this pooled entity. Their money will be pooled into this entity, and the job creation risk as well as the financial risk will be spread across those 6 individual locations. So in the unlikely event that 1 or even 2 of those locations don't make it, don't create the jobs, whatever it is, there will still be enough jobs projected to be available and enough capital and cash flow from those businesses to get the green card and have a return of capital.
Yeah, and just one comment, Mike. I think it's important to let everyone know, which you have, that these 6 locations are in existence at the time that the EB-5 investor has committed their funds, right? So the USCIS will know that this general business plan incorporates the 6 locations that will receive the EB-5 investment amount.
Correct. So that's Flying Biscuit. As it notes here, we do have 1 slot still available in that. We have 5 other investors that have either already filed their I-526s or are going through the remainder of that investment and filing process right now. The other transaction we have is the Drunken Dragon. It is also a restaurant. It is not a franchise. It is the 2nd location of a standalone restaurant. This one's based in North Miami, and the original location, which was founded in 2014, is located in the heart of Miami. It's performed extremely well over the years. Again, survived COVID very well. This Drunken Dragon is going into the growing area of North Miami, into one of the phases of a new commercial development, which includes hotels and retail, other restaurants. This is the only restaurant of its type that will serve breakfast, lunch, early dinner, and also stay open very late for their bar and their lounge will stay open very late, within, I think, 10 or 15 miles of this particular location in North Miami. So it's a kind of unique offering. This particular location is already under construction. They are using bridge capital to get the location up and opening as soon as possible. So the job creation will start sooner. Again, since it's not a regional center project, there's no job creation, even though they're under construction right now, until the operation opens and they hire the employees. But they want to get that done as quickly as possible. So they've provided bridge capital. The operator of this location also operates several other very successful restaurants in the Miami area, as well as other major cities in the United States. Been doing that for the last 25 years. very successfully. We did a lot of due diligence on this project as well. The owner, making sure that the projections were sound. The projections are actually very conservative compared to what the other Drunken Dragon location is doing, and it's still very comfortably profitable. This one has, I think, 13 and a half jobs per investor, so still, very, very strong job creation. And we just launched this offering. It pays 3% per year preferred return. Again, the investors are in a preferred position. They will get their annual return plus their capital back before the developer or owner gets any of their money back. We just launched it. There's 7 slots still available, 500,000 as well. Both of them are readily available now. We are going to have some others coming out. We're doing some due diligence on some other projects that will likely be launched in the first week or so of January. Still providing a little bit of a runway to get invest at 500,000 in some other projects before February 18th. But right now, these are the ones that we have, and we feel very strongly about them, again, based on our intense due diligence.
Mm-hmm. And just following up, Mike, you mentioned due diligence. Your company and you, I think you will probably remain involved in these projects until, usually the investors receive their full green card. In other words, you're not going to go away, right?
That's a great point.
So you're going to be offering this due diligence because some of the investors might say, well, look, it sounds like it's a great project. The groups, the company behind the project have experience, expertise, which supports the financial viability of the business. And at the same time, they're going to come to you, the investors, Mike, and say, well, look, it sounds like a financially viable business, and the likelihood of the exit strategy occurring, the return of capital, could be based upon revenue, could be based upon refinancing. So the type of business that's going to be able to be involved in the return of capital, you're going to be overseeing the fact that this is a goal for the investors, but it's also a goal for the project. So your due diligence becomes very important there.
Absolutely, and you mentioned a very good point. We are an intermediary. We don't represent. These are not our projects. We don't sponsor them. If they're successful, we don't make any extra money off of it. We're an intermediary like a lot of other agents. But because what makes us different as a registered broker dealer is, as Ed mentioned, we're there for the investor from start to finish. Lots of agents, they get you into an investment, they take their fee, and then they go away. And if something goes bad, you can never find them again. Based on U.S. securities law, we are required to represent investors in whatever investment they pursue through our firm, whether it's an EB-5 deal or non-immigration related project, which we also have through our broker dealer. But we're required by securities law, to represent that investor from start to finish. They actually become our clients in the eyes of the regulators that oversee our business. And therefore, we're there along the way, to make sure that the project is providing updates, making sure that you're going to, if there's issues or problems, that we're there to help solve them. Make sure that, you're able to get in touch with the project or the people that are involved, if they're not being responsive. And ultimately, as Ed said, once, throughout the entire part of the process, when it comes to your money flowing into the project, and then later on when you're either getting your annual returns or ultimately when you're looking to get your money back, we'll be there to make sure that all that money transfer occurs as it should, either via, through our own efforts, as well as these projects have both hired third-party compliance and escrow administrators to make sure that things are done properly, and there's no conflicts of interest when it comes to that. So you can be rest assured that there will be many parties, including us, leading the way to make sure that your money is protected, your investment's protected, and that you have answers to your questions when you need them. So I think We've got a minute or two here. We just want to talk very quickly about some other considerations, and then we'll do question and answers. If anybody has any questions, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to submit any questions that you have that we can answer in a few minutes about anything we talked about today, and even something that we didn't talk about. If you have a question about it, please put it in there. So as Ed and I were preparing for the webinar, we thought it was very important that people understand that, you know, besides the nuts and bolts of the EB-5 program and you know what's going on with the regional center, what's going on with direct pool, what our projects are, you know, that kind of thing. There are other considerations that investors need to understand, and those considerations include things like, you know, making sure that you seek investment advice. You know, if you're not, especially if you're not a sophisticated investor, or if you're investing in something in an industry that you're not really sure about, or you don't have any experience in, but you like the project, you want to, you know, have somebody besides us who's representing the project look at, you know, the viability of it. We encourage you to hire or reach out to, you know, financial advisors, other business advisors, people that can look at and maybe even perform some additional due diligence. We're happy to share some of that due diligence with external parties. There's some things that we can't disclose based on confidentiality, but you know, for the most part, I think it's very important that people understand that. The second thing is you know, a tax attorney or a CPA or chartered accountant or somebody that understands U.S. taxes and maybe also understands taxes in your native country to help do some pre-immigration tax planning, to understand what you're going to be exposed to once you become a U.S. person for tax purposes, which doesn't happen right away, depending on where you are. If you're outside the United States, it typically won't happen until you become a conditional permanent resident, and then you're going to be able to meet the substantial presence test. If you're here on some other visa, a student visa or H-1B or something like that, then you're already dealing with that probably in some capacity. So, but it's important that you understand what this particular investment will mean to you from a tax perspective. So those are a couple of examples. Ed, any other input on what?
You said it perfectly. I think, you know, when we mentioned that we help all the investors through a holistic approach, and it's just like, for example, if someone's going to have surgery, you know, they usually can go to a clinic. You know, Mike and I are in Florida, there's a Mayo Clinic that you can go there for a couple of days, and all the specialists will look at you and say, look, before you do the surgery, these are our opinions, right? Same with the investor, EB-5 investor. They want to preserve their wealth. They're coming from another country, coming into the US, and we're going to say to them, look, before you make the investment, there are a number of things that you can do, a number of things that you can review. And as an example, someone says, look, we want to make sure that we get a good return on our wealth. We want to make sure our wealth is protected. So as an example, they can come into the US, they still have their assets in their home country, they can buy real estate in the US, 2 million, 3 million, whatever it is. They can go to a mortgage company, borrow against the assets that they've already invested in, and then that borrowed money can be used for the EB-5 investment, right? So it's, the source is authenticated, they're protecting their wealth in another way. They're getting a good return on the real estate after a few years. They're getting a good return on maybe rental income. And now they're also investing in EB-5. This is one way that they can say, fantastic, we're moving forward very quickly. We're going to definitely make a decision. Mike's offering due diligence on the project. So it's a holistic approach. Every decision they make, as Mike said, may have a tax consequence, but that it has an immigration consequence. But we have to work together, right? I think that if they come in, the investor, and say, we are just going to make an investment and we're going to walk away, well, that may not be the best idea, because remember, they're committing their funds for several years, whether it's their own project, a pooled project. They want to be assured that they're getting the best advice, and then that way they can make the transition, preserve their wealth into the US, and they're not having a headache saying, oh, did I make a good decision or bad decision? They're doing this right from the beginning. And by the way, this holistic approach where they're getting all the experts, as Mike said, and as I'm saying, that can be done very quickly. It's not going to take months or years. It's only a matter of making sure that they make an informed decision, Mike, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's what we want. We want people to have as much information so they can make that informed decision. Obviously, we don't expect that people are going to read, all 600 pages of a PPM that we send out, which obviously includes a lot of exhibits. However, there's some important things in there that people need to be aware of, including the risk factors. There are risks with every investment, and we are very upfront about that. Even in our marketing material, we include a section as prominently as the benefits of what some of the key risks are. It doesn't list all the risks, but it lists some of the key risks of that specific investment, because we want people to be aware that there are risks. And not every investment is going to be successful. Now, thankfully, we've had 100% approval rates of I-526s and I-29s with the 500 plus investors that we've worked with. We've also so far had no project failures, meaning people have, job creation has occurred and people in several projects have gotten their return of capital. There's still several other projects that, either aren't at that stage yet or will be, shortly. But so far we've been very successful in that regard because of the due diligence, because we're working with good people that are putting together the offerings, such as immigration firms and business plan firms and economists and securities attorneys. People that are good at what they do in general, but also have experience in EB-5. I would say, the only other thing I would say is there are other things to consider too when it comes to coming to the United States. And maybe one of the things also to help people understand is, even if it's a direct project, if you're investing in a direct pooled project that we or somebody else is representing, you do not have to live in that area. You can live anywhere in the United States that you want to. So, you also want to make sure that you're finding the right place to move. And with EB-5, you have a little bit of time to make that decision because things take so long to adjudicate on your petitions. But lots of things, and these are things that both Ed's firm and we can help you with as you're making your investment decisions.
Yeah, and also, Mike, remember that a lot of the investors may say, look, we just don't want to travel right now because of COVID and the pandemic. The good news about EB-5 pooled projects is that they can file their EB-5 526 petition where they don't have to be in the US. And this petition is going to be good for all those family members under 21, right? Spouse and children under 21, because then the children are grandfathered in. So even during the process, before they get the conditional green card, a child turns 22, 23. The fact that the petition was filed before the child turns 21 is okay. And if we say that the average time for getting conditional green card is 2.5 years, well, that means that they can go through a process of taking care of their affairs in their home country. They don't have to be here. They can still visit, by the way, the US, but they don't have to live in the same location where the project is. And knowing that they're planning on the relocation could take 2.5 years, they have the time to do that. They don't have to be in the US to start making that investment, right? They don't have to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, with that, we are close to our time here. If you have a question, please submit it in the Q&A button down below, or you can put it in the chat too if you'd like. And if you don't have questions you'd like to ask now, we're going to have our contact information up there in a minute, so you can be able to contact Ed or me and follow up with any questions that you may have on any of the topics we talked about in this webinar. There's our contact information, emails, as well as our mobile phones. And we are we're approaching our 1 hour mark now. So if there are no questions, Ed, any parting sage advice?
Yeah, I've been, we've been giving these types of seminars and webinars for years, like you, Mike. And usually I have a statement that I put right at the end. The last word in self-help is help. right? So I think that all our investors need help. We have so many, consultations during the week of people, telling us their story, right? And I'm so surprised at the bad advice that a lot of the investors have obtained, right?
Sure.
Where it's just amazing to me how professionals can give advice where they don't know the topic, they don't know the subject, they don't do what you do, Mike, in offering good due diligence, because you have the experience and expertise in this area, and so do we. We have expertise in this area. But I'm just amazed at why people that are supposed to be professional will just say anything to obtain a client, anything. And it just amazes me, So, I've been doing this for a very long time, lawyer in both countries, Australia and the US. And this is a very enjoyable practice for you, Mike, and myself. We love EB-5. We love, the practice of law. You love what you do as far as offering due diligence. I love it. But I really feel sorry for a lot of the investors that aren't able to get good advice, and then they come to us, and then we have to tell them the truth, what's going on. Right. And then, then they can be on a path of confidence that they know they have a team of professionals, Mike, like yourself, your team and us, in hopefully guiding them through a process that should be fairly straightforward.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Right.
Understood.
So the last word I have is, the last word in self-help is help. They need Mike, they need me, they need good professionals, right?
Well, with that, Ed, thank you very much. Thank you for participating today, and look forward to doing future webinars with you. Again, anybody has any questions, please use the contact information that you see there to reach out to us. We appreciate your time today and joining us, and look out for more information. This will be available via, it's recorded, so it's going to be going out and available on our YouTube channel, as well as via Constant Contact. We're going to be sending out this video to everybody. So if you're watching this on a recorded basis, again, please feel free to contact us. For those of us that joined us live today, thank you for your time, and we look forward to interacting with you in the future. Take care.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much.